Alright, I may or may not have done some rage baiting, I honestly don't know yet. Anyways, so I got Pokemon Legends ZA and I recently completed it, so I'm going to give some sort of quasi-review and thoughts on it. There may be some like visual spoilers. This would be just mostly like post-game, not really story important content. There shouldn't be spoilers for the game itself here, but there may be spoilers for X and Y. I'm going to talk about the presentation and then move on to actual gameplay. As a short overview, I think just about everything the game does is ultimately pulled off pretty well. However, I think pre-release materials made it seem like this was a number of bad ideas that were ultimately executed very well. Anyways, so what is this game exactly? Legend ZA acts as a sequel on two separate fronts. The first and most obvious is that it is a sequel to Pokemon Legends Arceus as far as gameplay is concerned, and it is a direct story sequel to Pokemon X and Y, being set 5 years after those games. The game also appears to be an attempt to implement ideas for the fabled Pokemon Z, which, for context, the 6th generation of Pokemon was made up of X, Y, Omega Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire. After the release of the remakes, the Pokemon Company would release information about there being new forms for Zygarde. Ultimately, there never was a Pokemon Z, and the mechanics of this were put into Pokemon Sun and Moon. Despite this game taking place 5 years after X and Y, for the large part, there is very little of the returning cast, and of that cast, they are mostly characters that would be very easy to miss or forget, as these are characters that have very little screen time or are relegated to post-game content. The most notable exception being AZ, as this game is largely the result of the fallout of his action. To give a brief overview of who AZ is, he is the former king of the Kalos region, who 3,000 years prior built a device to revive his dead Floette, and then turned that device into a weapon to end the war that initially took its life, which granted him and Floette immortality, and also created the Mega Evolution phenomenon. During the events of X and Y, Team Flare attempted to reactivate this device. As a result, 5 years later, wild Pokemon in Lumiose City are undergoing something called Rogue Mega Evolution. Pokemon X and Y depicted Mega Evolution as the result of the bond between trainer and Pokemon, allowing fully evolved Pokemon to temporarily go beyond the limits of regular evolution. The contemporary episodes of the anime and later games would go on to show that Mega Evolution is ultimately not a very pleasant experience, with the implication being that the bond between a trainer and Pokemon allows the Pokemon to overcome the obstacles associated with Mega Evolution. Rogue Mega Evolution, however, affects wild Pokemon who do not have such a luxury, and as a result pose a danger to the inhabitants of Lumiose City. This plays into the other main plot motivation, that being the ZA Royale. This is a tournament that runs at nighttime in Lumiose City, where trainers will attempt to go from rank Z up to A by battling other trainers until they get a ticket to do promotion matches. Upon reaching A rank, Quasartico, the company running the Royale, and Lumiose's renovation project will offer to grant a wish to the best of their ability. Fairly early on, it is revealed that the Royale's main purpose for existing is for scouting out trainers who are able to help deal with the Rogue Mega Evolution problem. While I would recommend playing X or Y beforehand, anyways, I'm going to move on to the presentation of the game now. So I had two main concerns with the presentation of this game. 1. Does the overworld look nice? And 2. Does the game run like complete and utter garbage? I am happy to announce that the game looks pretty nice and it runs pretty well. While I have been playing the Nintendo Switch 2 edition, my brother-in-law was playing the Nintendo Switch 1 version of the game, and he says it runs pretty well. There is the occasional hiccup, but it is not the disaster that Scarlet and Violet were, so that is good to hear. To address some of the more popular talking points about the game, yes, the buildings in Lumiose do for the most part simply use textures in place of windows and most balconies. This really didn't bother me because I initially thought, okay, this is what they're doing to make sure it runs good. However, they do make use of normal maps, so the flatness is not as apparent up until you are right up against them. It's also not as much of an issue as you would think when actually playing the game, as they largely sit in your peripheral vision. Characters are also not affected by lighting. I just assumed this was a stylistic choice to make them easier to see. So yeah, I guess it would be nicer if they were affected by lighting, but I personally don't care. The art style has also returned to more simplified textures, and human characters now more closely resemble their Sugimori artwork, which are changes I like a little bit more. While it was fun to see the more detailed textures of the Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet, I think they clashed with the models to an extent. Character customization returns once again, with about the same number of facial options for your player character, and with a wide array of clothing options. One of the things that I like that they did to help keep the humans seeming a little bit more fresh is that there will be several different palette options for any one model, though these models may also be tweaked a little bit per palette. Most notably this variation of the Hex Maniac having glasses, and the Pokemon Center ladies also looking different. Throughout Lumiose, you will see just random groups of people and their Pokemon standing about, Overworld characters that move around on their own, however, will cycle through a couple of different options, which I think helps just keep everything a little bit more lively. I believe for the most part that Pokemon are reusing the same walk and attack animations that they've had for years now. Within the context of the new battle system, however, these animations feel a lot less repetitive. And following that topic, it seems that the visual flares associated with the different types of Pokeball have also been changed, with the Quick Ball most notably now having this effect. One of the other visual pieces I really liked is that throughout Lumiose there are a number of 2D art pieces that vary from being postcards, magazine covers, advertisements, posters, or recreations of actual paintings. And I just think that these assets are all really charming. I would consider buying one of these and hanging them up on the wall. Also, to return back to random characters, they say just interesting things now. When encountering shinies, the sparkly extra effect to let you know that one has spawned in has returned from Legends Arceus, and the shiny Pokemon now sparkles on the overworld. And lastly, the music is really good. The majority of the time you will be listening to a few variations of the Lumiose City theme. The editions do a pretty decent job of keeping things fresh on a sound level. And while the majority of the game does take place outside in Lumiose City, there are a couple of other areas you can go to that feel pretty distinct from the rest of the city. The trainers you fight in the promotion matches take the place of gym leaders effectively. While the earlier ones are pretty generic, they're still fairly memorable. The later game ones are much more interesting, such as a guy who is presented as a crime lord to make you do community service, or a streamer that is like a video game streamer this time, and characters orbiting these also are similarly interesting. For example, the streamer's grandfather runs the construction company. So it's me like a week later, and I thought Audacity did not save this properly, and I thought I had to redo everything. Anyways, the one thing I didn't like visually is that there's like a limited number of animations for non-important trainers you can battle. I feel like this is the most notable with the female trainers, but the majority of them use the same animations in battle, which I think for the most part just isn't fitting. More like important characters have their own animations, but generics not so much. Anyway, it is time to move on to the gameplay. So first I'm going to go over catching. As the follow-up to Legends Arceus, you would expect it to expand upon the whole catching gameplay loop, that being the use of stealth, how the different balls react when thrown, and the use of lures. ZA dials all of this back considerably, as basically all of the balls can be thrown the exact same way, and aiming has largely been removed as there is a simple lock-on button. Additionally, stealth has been significantly reduced. It's still an element, however, it is severely downplayed relative to Legends Arceus. This is largely the result of the fact that the game is much more focused on battling. However, it is the very same refocus on battling that acts to close the gap between the catching mechanics in Arceus and ZA. But as far as Legends Arceus is concerned, there's about two separate ways that you interact with wild Pokemon. There is a pre-battle and battle phase. During the pre-battle phase, Pokemon will attempt to either run away from or attack the player, and they are free to basically throw as many Pokeballs as they can at the Pokemon. However, after enough failed attempts, the Pokemon is enraged and you basically need to start battling it. However, once you are actually battling a Pokemon, your character is free to run around it all they want, but the wild Pokemon's focus is entirely on your Pokemon, at which point you are free to whittle down its health at your own leisure. The real-time battling format, however, means that in Legends GA there is no transition between the pre-battle and mid-battle stage of catching a Pokemon. The player is free to throw out their own Pokemon to fight the target at any point, with the move cooldown taking the place of turns. Additionally, all moves now have an area of effect, meaning that the wild Pokemon is able to target both the player and their Pokemon. This means that where the player moves is actually important when fighting a wild Pokemon, leaving them to juggle positioning, move cooldowns, and finding an opportunity to actually throw a Pokeball, while also avoiding being attacked by other wild Pokemon. Alpha Pokemon also return. Aside from being bigger and having better stats initially, this means that they also have a larger hitbox and hurtbox, and I believe they also have the max health stat for their species. Alphas will also know a move that is typically not learned by other members of their species. For example, this is the only way to have a Pikachu with Iron Tail. Wild Alphas also now take significantly less damage from your Pokemon. This means that low-level Alphas will not be one-shot by your level 100 Pokemon. However, you are able to get around this through the use of plus moves and Mega Evolution, which I will now be touching on. As I previously mentioned, the battle system is now real-time, meaning that positioning is important and moves are area of effect with cooldown. This has done some significant rebalancing between what moves are considered good and not. Dig is now basically Protect that does damage. This also means some moves that were previously good are now kind of terrible, and weaker moves that would deal damage over time are now an area of effect, allowing for field control. This also buffs weaker moves by a decent margin. Weaker moves typically have a shorter cooldown. In a turn-based system, there is very little reason to choose Water Gun over Surf, as these are both water-type moves that deal special damage. And while Water Gun can be used significantly more than Surf, combined with the fact that battles typically don't last long enough for this to be a concern, and that both moves cost a turn to use, there's realistically very little reason to use Water Gun over Surf, and even less so to carry both moves. However, in the face of this real-time system, it is possible possible that the move dealing less damage overall is worth the shorter cooldown. The removal of turns means that Surf and Water Gun no longer have the same opportunity cost, meaning that it could be viable to have both Water Gun and Surf on a single Pokemon, as one move can be used while the other is on cooldown. My biggest complaint about the new system after playing through the game is that I don't think any of the battles tend to go on long enough for the player to really get to experiment with positioning. This is resolved by multiplayer battling, but that is also the case with literally every other Pokemon game. To return to the point of Mega Evolution and Plus moves, I'm going to go over Plus moves first. These can be seen as a reiteration upon the strong and agile style versions of moves from Legends Arceus. These are basically just versions of moves that deal more damage. By default, a Pokemon will only learn the plus variant of a move if they learn that move through level up. Moves learned through TMs can be upgraded by talking to a specific character. Plus moves will also hit through Protect, and status moves are more potent. Plus moves can be activated at any time by pressing the plus button and then selecting the move, assuming that the player has enough Mega Energy. Following that tangent, Mega Evolution has been reworked. Unlike previous titles where Mega Evolution was effectively a new Pokemon that couldn't hold an item by means of them already holding the Mega Stone, Mega Evolution is basically treated as a power-up state, with all moves used by the Mega Evolved Pokemon being considered a plus move. Mega Evolution now effectively runs on a timer, as the Pokemon will revert back to normal once this meter is depleted. Additionally, any Pokemon using a plus move will also reduce this meter. The meter is filled by successfully landing attacks either on Pokemon or Mega Crystal. Plus moves are also activated by simply pressing the plus button and then selecting a move. They also break through the additional defenses of Alpha Pokemon. Following that, Rogue Mega Evolution takes the place of the Noble battles from Legends Arceus. Despite what I had previously said about none of the battles lasting long enough to really take advantage of the positioning mechanics, the Rogue Mega Evolution battles are the best showcase of this. In Legends Arceus, the noble Pokemon would actively target the player. The same is true for the Rogue Mega Evolution. However, instead of throwing bombs, it is the player's own Pokemon that will be dealing damage to the Rogue. Generally speaking, the Rogue Mega pretty much just ignores your Pokemon. However, your Pokemon does get caught in the crossfire. It's also highly recommended that you bring a Pokemon that can Mega Evolve, as doing so allows you to deplete the Rogue's health significantly quicker. The Mega Energy also only recharges when you pick up these orbs, which you will get by damaging the Rogue. Now I think I get to talk about exploration. While you are limited exclusively to Lumiose City, it has obviously been significantly expanded since X and Y, and while there are a few side areas such as the sewers, the majority of your time is spent either on street level or among the rooftops. Also, there's like a decent amount of basic parkour, notably through small platforming challenges that are spread throughout Lumiose, that either get you on top of a building or give you some sort of item. At one point, you're effectively given a glide, which allows you to jump from rooftop to rooftop. It's fun seeing where you can get yourself with this, as I feel like I've managed to find a few alternate pathways to doing things with it. Also, there are still research tasks. They are generalized rather than to any specific species. The end reward for this is your Shiny Charm. You have to do 1,000 battles. I think the 1,000 battles to get the Shiny Charm is a bit excessive. Also, this is on top of all the other research you're doing. Mostly because at one point you are just going to have to grind it out. I did 700, then turbo controller the rest. My final point about exploring Lumiose is the Wild Zone. It was basically depicted that this would be where you catch Pokemon. The end result is really somewhere you can catch a variety of species of Pokemon, as a number of different Pokemon can be found all throughout Lumiose City. These are pretty much just a hot spot. Okay, I probably should have mentioned this like way earlier rather than the last 30 seconds here. As I previously mentioned, there's a much higher focus on battling, and that is where the ZA Royale comes in. Basically, at nighttime, there's the tournament going on, and you need to get a promotional ticket, which you get by getting points. You collect these points by fighting other trainers or doing little side quests you get from these cards, which amount to like sneaking up on someone or using super effective moves of a certain type. And the more little bonus challenges you do, the quicker you get your promotional ticket. And this is where you basically get to fight the game's gym leaders. They're not gym leaders, they're other people in the tournament, but they are effectively gym leaders. It's also a really good way to make money. This is tied to the day-night cycle as previously mentioned. You basically only do the Royale within a battle zone, which is part of the map that will open up. It's outlined in red, and that is where everyone wants to fight you. You can sneak up on other trainers, or they can sneak up on you. I like that it addresses one of my concerns that I had with Scarlet and Violet, notably that basically anyone who isn't a rival or directly tied to a main quest is an optional fight. And as a result, yeah, I could go and fight these people whenever I wanted to, but let's be real, whenever you're playing a game with optional combat, you basically avoid optional combat whenever you can. ZA basically gives you a direct incentive to then go and fight random trainers for the sake of fighting them. I think this did a really good job of reintegrating required battles into the game. Okay, that's all I can think of to say for now, because I've tried too many times to record this thing. My end score is the game is good. If you've played a Pokemon game before, you're gonna have a good time. If you haven't played a Pokemon game before, you're probably gonna have a good time. Anyways, my only other final thing, because I kept forgetting to mention this, is that the pop-in in the game is kind of weird. I had a comment I was going to say about the pop-in and how it's kind of weird, but what's going on is basically you have 4 tiers of human. You have story relevant, random people who you can talk to, random people who walk around, and then you have people that only exist at a distance. And in practice, that means that more important characters are going to be visible on screen significantly earlier than filler characters. I assume that is to make it easier to track down important characters, but it is still very strange because logically I should be able to see the people that are closer to me first. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Game is good. You should play it. If you play Pokemon, you'll like it. If you haven't played Pokemon, you'll probably like it. Also, the DLC comes out on December 10th. I'll probably do a follow-up once I'm done with that.